Parenting is a very complex endeavor, not one that we get much training for. And one thing we know is that parents ought to be loving, and we need to watch out for our kids, and we need to teach our kids things, and we need to show them how to be and what to do, how to show up in the world. That's what a responsible parent does. Now, what if the thing that we call love is actually driving our kids away as they get older? Now, I'm a mother of seven kids, two grandkids, and I have been through it all. And I have seen so clearly how the thing that we want to teach them and we want to guide them, we want to role model for them, we want to be everything to them, we want to anticipate their mistakes and save them from them. Those are the behaviors that could actually cause our kids to drift away from us as they get older. And I call this dynamic smotherhood. It's motherhood, but it's too much. It feels like love when we give it, but it feels like pressure when they receive it. Nobody wants to feel pressured. We are biologically wired to avoid pressure. And I've seen this so much with my own kids. I've seen it with my coaching clients. You've got a kid, he's away at college and he's trying to find his way. He's got ADHD, anxiety, whatever, trying to do his homework. And his mom is texting him every day. What's going on with that math test? I saw your grades. That's not going very well. You know what the kid's going to do? The kid's going to shut down and the kid's going to stop. The kid is not going to study harder. The kid is going to say, who needs this? I'm going off to party. So, as good, loving, responsible parents, what we might just be doing is sending our kids to the opposite behaviors that we actually want them to do. When does motherhood happen? Motherhood happens when presence becomes pressure. Now, here's the rub with motherhood. You don't know what it feels like to be your child, right? Because when you're giving it, you're like, this is what a caring parent does. And that's why it is so important not to ask yourself if it's coming from smothering, because we know it's coming from love, but whether it's being received as smothering. And that is the most critical point that most parents, shockingly, don't even think of. When they're about to say something, make a phone call, text something, forward an email, very few parents actually ask themselves, how is my kid on the other side of this communication going to receive this missive? They don't even ask themselves the question, because what's fascinating is if you did ask yourself the question 9 out of 10 times, you're going to know the answer because you know your kid. Nobody knows your kid better than you do. The problem is that parents aren't even thinking about it that way. And that's why I think it's so important to have a name. It's called smotherhood. It's a real thing. And that's the reality that our kids are living in. And this is especially what happens when kids get older. They grow up, they move away. Maybe they have, they're in a relationship or they're married or they have kids, right? And now the parents really want in. They want to know what's going on and how's your this and how's your life and your job and your kids. And they want to know everything. Well, what does an adult kid want? They want space, they want autonomy, they want to be respected, they want to be trusted. And what's so ironic about this whole idea is that this problem is the domain of good parents. Parents who are not good parents, right? They're neglectful. They don't remember to follow up. They're busy with their own life. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about being overly good parents because there is such a thing as too much love. And that is what I call smotherhood. It's fascinating because love is like a wave. Love comes and it goes, right? We're not in constant communication with our grown kids. It's kind of like there are times that we're more in touch, less in touch. There are times of life that are a little bit more in crisis, and then times that are more peaceful and more quiet. And that's fine. That's the definition of a normal relationship. The question is that you always want to ask yourself, you want to pause before you solve a problem and ask yourself, how is my kid going to perceive what I'm about to say? And I don't think it's smothering. I don't call it criticism. I don't call it pressure. But what would my kid think it is? So, in that one pause, we can ask ourselves the pointed question that will lead us to understand if our behavior feels like smotherhood. What if you could ask your kid a follow up question instead of telling them what to do? I know parents want to tell their kids what to do. We have such good advice. If our kids would only listen to all of our advice, everything would be perfect. Guess what? They don't want your advice. They need to figure stuff out for themselves. That's the actual definition of adulthood. Isn't that what you did? So instead of giving them your awesome, excellent, curated advice, ask a follow-up question instead and listen carefully to what they have to say. That's how you retract that wave, make space for your child to be themselves instead of smothering and pressuring them. And finally, and this is so key, listen without judging. And by the way, sometimes your face is judging, even if your mouth is saying nothing. So be really careful about what you're thinking on the inside. Try to think less judgmental thoughts. Remind yourself that you too had to take your time and space to become an adult, and it doesn't happen by itself. So, smotherhood is not something that we ever intend to do. It's just received that way if we're not careful and if we're not asking ourselves, how is what I am about to say and do going to land for the other person? And we know when we see waves, if you're sitting at the beach and you're watching waves and they can seem really gentle, but when they accumulate and they gather steam, it can be overwhelming and overpowering. That's not how any parent wants to show up for their kids. So let's ask ourselves the question, am I showing up with motherhood or am I showing up with smotherhood?